Once upon a time, in a small village at the edge of a dense, dark forest, there lived a sweet little girl who was loved by everyone who knew her. She was known for her kindness and cheerful nature, and because she always wore a red cloak with a hood, everyone called her Little Red Riding Hood. One day, Little Red Riding Hood's mother called her and said, "Your grandmother is not feeling well, dear. Please take this basket of goodies to her. There's some bread, butter, and fresh fruit. But remember, stay on the path and do not talk to strangers." "Yes, mother," Little Red Riding Hood replied. She was excited to visit her grandmother, who lived in a cottage on the other side of the forest. Little Red Riding Hood took the basket, put on her red cloak, and set off on her journey. As she walked through the forest, the sun was shining and the birds were singing. The path was bright and clear, and Little Red Riding Hood felt safe and happy. However, she did not know that a sly and cunning wolf was watching her from behind the trees. The wolf, who was always on the lookout for an easy meal, thought to himself, what a delicious little snack she would make. But then he had a better idea. He decided to play a trick on Little Red Riding Hood and get two meals instead of one, both the girl and her grandmother. The wolf approached Little Red Riding Hood, pretending to be friendly. "Good day, Little Red Riding Hood," he said in a silky voice. "Where are you going on this fine day?" Little Red Riding Hood, forgetting her mother's advice, answered politely, "I'm going to visit my grandmother. She lives in a cottage on the other side of the forest." "Oh, how wonderful," said the wolf, pretending to be interested. "Why don't you pick some flowers for her? I'm sure she would love that." Little Red Riding Hood thought this was a lovely idea. She wandered off the path to gather flowers, not realizing that the wolf had tricked her and was hurrying off to her grandmother's house. The wolf arrived at the grandmother's cottage and knocked on the door. "Who is it?" called the grandmother from her bed. "It's me, Little Red Riding Hood," said the wolf, trying to mimic the girl's voice. "Come in, dear," said the grandmother, who was too weak to get out of bed. The wolf opened the door and, with a single leap, he was beside the grandmother. Before she could cry out, the wolf swallowed her whole. Then he put on her nightgown, tucked himself into her bed, and pulled the covers up to his chin, waiting for Little Red Riding Hood. Meanwhile, Little Red Riding Hood had gathered a bouquet of flowers and continued on her way. When she reached her grandmother's cottage, she was surprised to find the door open. "Grandmother," she called as she stepped inside, "are you home?" "Yes, my dear, come in," the wolf said, trying to sound like the grandmother. Little Red Riding Hood entered the room and approached the bed. She noticed something was different about her grandmother. "Grandmother, what big ears you have," she said. "All the better to hear you with, my dear," replied the wolf. "Grandmother, what big eyes you have," she said, stepping closer. "All the better to see you with, my dear," said the wolf. "Grandmother, what big hands you have," Little Red Riding Hood exclaimed, now feeling a bit uneasy. "All the better to hug you with, my dear," said the wolf, grinning wickedly. "Grandmother, what big teeth you have," she said, her voice trembling. "All the better to eat you with," roared the wolf as he jumped out of the bed. Little Red Riding Hood screamed and tried to run, but the wolf was too fast. Just as he was about to pounce on her, a woodcutter who was passing by the cottage heard the commotion. He burst into the room, and with one swift swing of his axe, he struck down the wolf. The wolf fell to the ground, and the woodcutter quickly cut open the wolf's belly, freeing the grandmother, who was unharmed, though very shaken. Little Red Riding Hood hugged her grandmother tightly, relieved that they were both safe. "Thank you, brave woodcutter," said the grandmother.